Mendeecees Harris is finally officially free, but his release has caused a storm that no one anticipated. His arrest seemed to put a stop to the family's never-ending drama, but now there's more upheaval. Rumors are circulating, emotions are running high, and the streets are alive with speculation as insiders whisper about sudden confrontations, unexpected betrayals, and a fact so explosive that it might tear everything apart. Did it have value, or was there a dark side at play? What about him, Yandy? Her response to this news has left fans stunned. Some say she pushed for this chance, while others say she never wanted him to return home. The huge surprise, however, is that Mendeecees thinks he was provided evidence of what actually happened in the final hours before his departure and why, as well as clues that prison changed him in ways no one could have predicted. Do you believe that something far more important is about to begin? If so, buckle up because we'll be talking about all the amazing aspects of Mendeecees Harris' release. I promise you won't believe what comes next. It began with a bad dream, one of those nightmares that look too real to be true. When a phone call came in the middle of the night and word leaked out that Mendeecees Harris was once again in jail, everything changed. It shocked Mendeecees Harris to learn that she had fought too hard, made too many sacrifices, and stood by him through it all. Yet now it was happening once more. Her heart was racing as she heard the facts, and she was barely aware of what she was hearing. A mistake must have been made. Mendeecees had assured her that he would not be involved in any activities that might endanger their family, but here they were, and within hours, angry, speculative notions were rife on social media. Opinions among fans varied. Some believed that he was innocent and that this was all a setup or misunderstanding. They thought of his previous court cases and the years he had already been incarcerated. Was this just another instance of the past, or was something much more sinister going on in the prison? Alone, DC wondered how he got here. He was not new to this life. He knew how the system operated and knew how quickly things happened. Perhaps everything would fall apart, but something seemed different. It wasn't just the metal bars, the cold walls, and the footsteps of the other prisoners. There was a tension in the air that made his skin itch, and people who appeared to know something about him were staring at him. Why does it seem like everyone in this room knows something? I know that no one responded directly to him, only sly looks, cryptic remarks, and whispers that stopped as soon as he. Yandy wasn't simply sitting there crying. She was acting like she was in crisis mode. This had never happened to her before, and she had no desire to let Mendeecees rot in a prison. She called lawyers, demanding answers for every favor she could think of. What caused this? What accusations were made against them? Why hadn't she left? Had a sick feeling in his stomach that wouldn't go away? The more she investigated, the stranger it seemed, but this was to be anticipated. Important details were left out, the explanation was incomplete, and several officials seemed not to fully understand the reasons behind his incarceration. Communication was cut off, documents were sealed, and she felt as if she were up against an unseen power. The first significant shock came next. A single word, anonymous, untraceable message that men in Washington, D.C. shouldn't be reading. However, he must also not fail Yan's blood ram. How on earth did that imply anything? Were they attempting to silence him? Had he done anything dangerous without even realizing it? She was certain that the message was about something far more severe than a normal court case, but she did not know who had sent it. But BC wasn't just sitting about in prison. He was watching and listening to try to understand what was causing the strange feelings. In the cafeteria, a man he had never seen before sat down across from him without introducing himself, forcing him to spend the first few seconds gazing at Mendeecees. Prior to saying, "You don't belong here," he just ate meticulously and slowly without looking up. The guards and the prisoners were too quiet and too cautious. He felt as though he had been thrust into an unfamiliar situation. It was purportedly intended to demonstrate that the man had finally looked him in the eyes, and something in them made Mendeecees tremble. "Since you don't comprehend what you're going through, if I were you, I would be praying for an early release." The man got up and left, leaving me sitting there with my heart and mind racing, wondering what the devil was going on. Then everything changed as abruptly as if he had been put in jail late that night, long after the lights had gone out. The Mendeecees were awakened by a guard, not just any guard, but one of the Hups who didn't just wander around at this hour unless something significant was going on. DC sat up, eyes narrowed, and the guard simply signaled him to go without responding. He couldn't get rid of the feeling that this wasn't merely as he passed the cells and the other prisoners who were hiding in the shadows. He was being taken somewhere on a regular transfer for a purpose, and at last they stopped in a small, dimly lit room where another man in a suit was waiting. "Mr. Harris, have a seat." DC's. This man clearly didn't belong in a jail at this hour. It was cold, but it doesn't matter. What matters is that you're leaving the heater. The man smiled and stayed still. The man leaned forward a little when I blinked. Recognize that you owe someone money before you celebrate. When DC's stomach dropped, he realized something wasn't quite right. The man left the room with a big smile on his face, leaving me with a lot of unsolved issues and the depressing realization that his independence was not truly freedom at all. Yandy's phone rang outside, and she scooped it up frantically, expecting to miss another call. Instead of responding, she stood still for a time, unable to process the news that she had been waiting so long to hear, that MDC was being freed. After all the opposition, doubt, and difficulties, reality set in, and she saw that no one had any explanation for his sudden release. Just as she was starting to feel a sense of relief, her phone buzzed again, and this time it displayed a message that was exactly the same as the previous one. "He's going home, but he's not safe." Yandy found it difficult to breathe. What on earth was going on? That was the question that would accompany them both as men left the prison gates and entered a world that was now far more dangerous than he had ever dreamed. Several just left the jail gates after being severely jolted by reality, the blazing paparazzi camera lights and the deafening cries of. He sat there for a while, watching the prison fade into the distance outside the window, but instead of feeling comforted, a feeling of unease crept into his chest from his phone, which had been off for weeks. He lowered his head and went straight to the black SUV that was parked outside. The door opened, and he let out a deep sigh and climbed into the back seat. The overbearing crowd of reporters and spectators proved that his release was a public spectacle, was a bomb that was about to explode. As soon as he turned it on, he was flooded with missed calls, texts, and mentions on social media. After following his case, people from all around the world were responding to his release. Some of the messages were favorable, but not all of them were. Eventually, after sorting through the chaos, he received a text from Yandy that stated, "We need to talk about something." He immediately contacted her and said, "Baby, I'm just heading home." He stopped to maintain his composure, and then he heard Yandy's voice, which was colder than he had anticipated. He placed his phone down and rubbed his hands together anxiously, saying, "Okay, I'll be here," but adding, "But that was it. No relief or excitement, just that flat, unreadable response, man." He had long fantasized of coming home with Yandy and the kids, but something told him it wouldn't be that easy. His driver sensed the tension but didn't react, and the drive home seemed longer than ever. As the car approached the house, he stepped out gently, his pulse pounding in his chest, relishing the sight of home. However, as he approached the door, he discovered that the only sounds he could hear were the engine hum and the thump of passing cars. His thoughts were racing. Was Yandy furious about anything? Was she simply overwhelmed? Or had something happened while he was inside? Even a few weeks in jail may make all the difference, even though he hadn't been gone for years. Yandy was standing in the living room with her arms crossed when he entered. She was not grinning or running into him. Instead, her face was unreadable, and she simply stared at him. She said, "Hey baby, I'm home," and then became silent. She said, "We need to talk," and swallowed hard. "All right, what's the deal, MCs?" Yandy shook her head and took a deep breath. "I realize it wasn't easy, but you don't realize," she interrupted him. MC walked over to Yandy and said, "I just got out. Could we just act like nothing had occurred?" "What are we talking about?" He scowled. Yandy turned aside, brushed her hair and uttered, "You know how many people were in my ear telling me to get out of here and move on?" His stomach dropped when she whispered, "You're not serious." He said, his voice softer now, "But I'm here, I'm home, and we can fix this." Yandy shot him a sour look. "I held it down for you, MCs. I stood up for you when people said you would never leave. I took care of the kids, the house, everything. I know it was difficult." The men in our relationship, BCs, reached for her hands, but she pulled away. Then came the next bombshell. "I need to know the truth," Yandy said, looking into his eyes and saying, "I heard you laugh." That simple man felt a pit in his stomach because this wasn't how it was supposed to go. After hearing the rumors, Mendeecees stiffened. "What rumors?" Yandy inhaled deeply. MC shook his head in frustration. "Yandy, you know me. You know the man I am." "Do I?" she challenged. "Yes, you do." She stared at him for a long moment before taking her phone out of a drawer, scrolling for a moment, and then turning the screen towards him. "I didn't know these facts about men." BC Stay, his jaw clenched, said, "Who's been saying that? Heat matters, whether it's true or not." "Where did you get this?" He said quietly, "Is it important?" Yandy shot back, looking down at his blood-stained cold. "I need you to be honest with me about VCs right now," he continued. The screen showed a message thread that hinted at something Yandy had never heard of and had just come home, a chat between two people who claimed to be related to this past. Rico's warning was not only a threat, but also a reminder that his past had never fully let him go. His hands were balled into fists. His mind was racing from the weight of what had just happened, and his heart was pounding in his chest as he looked at his phone, the call from the unknown number still echoing in his head. Yandy was standing with her arms crossed when he turned around to face her, her expression. Yandy responded with a hollow laugh to his low but firm voice. "Believe me," he said, "because after everything, MDCs, you disappeared into that prison, and now you're back acting like you can't control what I do, what I ask, or who I talk to. Do you think I'll just sit here and say nothing? This isn't related to control." He couldn't read her eyes, but he could sense the conflict there as her enduring love for him was battling the pain of betrayal. Ed was exhausted, and every moment since leaving that prison felt like a battle against the outside world, his past, and now the very person he had wanted to return home to. Yandy shook her head and said, "This is about keeping you safe from what men VCs from your past, from the things you never told me, because if that's the case, then I should have never been in danger to begin with." Men saw her, his chest rising and falling with deep breaths, and he could see the fire in her eyes and her determination. If he didn't tell her, she would keep digging, and if she did, he swallowed hard back before I went in. Yandy helped me understand, then shot back, telling me the truth. Other than the things that got me locked up, I was involved in other things involving people I believed to be my brothers, my friends, and when I left the mess behind when I went to jail, Yandy's eyes narrowed. What kind of mess did MCs exhale? A deal that never got done, money that never got delivered, and now those people think I owe them. Yandy's face twisted in disbelief. "So all this time you were out here worrying about me, but in reality, they're after you." "It's not just me, Yandy." MBC's voice rose. "It's you, our family, and even if they can't get to me, they'll still get you." Mink said, "I thought I was protecting you, but now you've made yourself a target." Yandy stepped back, her arms wrapped around herself. "You've been keeping secrets, creating enemies, and putting us all in danger, and you didn't think I should know." Yandy laughed bitterly. "Oh, so this is my fault." MC shook his head and approached her, saying, "No." Yandy said, "It's not your fault. It's mine." And he could see the struggle going on inside her head, the anger, hurt, and fear. Finally, she spoke, and before M could respond, a loud knock came through the house, and they both froze. The knock came again, harder this time, and MC's heart pounded as he took out his phone to check the security camera on the front porch. Yandy saw Rico's reaction instantly. But the MBCs did not respond. Instead, he turned and walked towards the door, his steps heavy, and he took a deep breath before swinging it open. "Hello, Mendeecees," Rico said in a low voice, his jaw clenched. Rico's blood ran cold, and he stood at the door with his hands in his pockets and his face contorted in that same smug grin that BC had seen far too often before. "DCS didn't move, so we're not doing anything, so whatever you came for, you can leave." Rico's smirk lightened a little, "But you're mistaken. I came here to collect, and you know exactly what I mean." Yandy appeared behind M, her arms crossed. Rico's eyes brightened, and she must be the wife. "Are you going to invite me in, or are we acting like animals here?" BC's mind raced because he knew Rico wasn't bluffing. The man never showed up without a reason, and if he was standing at Mendeecees' doorstep, it meant it was because of his darkened face. But let's face it, that's not why I'm here. You have business to handle, and if you don't, I don't need to tell you what happens next. "You have 48 hours, Rico added in a tone that was much worse than he had anticipated, casual but menacing. Then, with Yandy by his side, her face suddenly pale, and MDC standing there with his fists clenched so tightly that his claws dug into it, he turned and disappeared down the porch back into the night. As it had happened, Mindy turned to face her. Correcting the unreadable face takes 2 days. If not, everything will collapse.